This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid-state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid-state, turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders, today I am honored to have Erica Rooney on the show. She is a keynote speaker, executive coach, chief people officer, and the host of podcasts From Now to Next. So we're going to talk about making 2023 the best year ever. We're going to talk about how we can improve the culture of our environment, become a better leader, and get the most out of this year just as a person. So with all that being said, Erica, welcome to the show.
Hey, best year ever. I love it.
So tell the audience a little bit about how you got to where you are today in your career and what is it that you do?
Oh my gosh, that's such a loaded question. But I actually had no idea that I would end up in HR. And I swear if you had asked me that question back when I was in college or even after college, I would have told you were fully you know what. But in college, I knew that I wanted to help people. And I thought I would do that through nursing school. My mom was a nurse. My grandmother was a nurse. Seemed like it was a steady job. It would pay the bills. And so I started nursing school in that track. And I very quickly realized like blood and guts was not for me. Bodily fluids was not for me. That's not going to work. So I became a lost little lamb and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I ended up in a community health track. So why people do what they do and why they don't do what they should. Mm-hmm. And I happened to be in a class that was a worksite wellness class. And we had a gym in the area come to our class and kind of give this little sales pitch because they were looking for personal trainers. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. You know, I get paid to work out. I can build it around my schedule. Sounds great. So had never really worked out in a gym before, never really lifted weights before, but I was all about it. I've always been a hustler. I've always been one to have jobs, and that one paid well. So I was like, we're going to do it. Got into that. And then a slew of events landed me working with Verizon corporate in their on-site location in North Carolina in a gym. So we actually had this huge gym and I was teaching boot camps. I was doing personal training, nutritional classes, and it was perfect for me because I was helping people, right? So it all tied in. I was like, wow, I have found my dream job at the age of 20, whatever, right? And I remember thinking, damn, I'm so lucky that I have found the job that I'm going to retire from. Come on now, really? At that age? Come on. So also very much a growth mindset person. I always want to read more, do more, learn more, get a new certification, all of that stuff. And that's not possible in fitness and wellness. Not unless you are going to be Oprah's trainer. Are you going to continue to excel in personal training? And so I just felt very capped out at a very young age, right? I was like, this is it for me. And I started looking at other avenues that I could explore. And HR was one of them. So got into HR through a lot of job applications, a lot of networking, and found out that it was the perfect track for me because I was continuing to help people. And the sky was the limit, right? I could get all the way to the C-suite. And I did in less than 10 years, you know? So here I am, I'm under 40, I'm in the C-suite, I'm leading teams, I'm still helping people, but I missed helping people individually, right? Because the higher up you climb the corporate ladder, the farther you are away from the individual.
Yep.
And so I'm helping corporations, which is amazing. I love what I do, but I wasn't quite scratching my itch of helping people, which is what I did to get into the keynote speaking and executive coaching and consulting, because I could one-on-one work with people, or I could see the people I was impacting through my keynotes in a room. And that's kind of the very long-winded story of how I landed in HR.
Nice. So, what do you mentioned keynote speaking and getting into that, and that's something that I've done a good bit about, in the past, and I've kind of gotten away from it a little bit just because of family, time, travel, just, it all catches up to you eventually. What is it that you see that is fun about speaking? Because for me, it was always fun to try to take a different approach because, I'm in tech, and most tech talks are kind of boring, just to be honest with you. So how can you make that exciting? How can you make that a little bit different? What can you bring to it to add value? What was it that you enjoyed about it?
It's a little bit of an adrenaline rush, first of all. So I think that is like a little bit of the dopamine hit. But I love being able to see people's faces that I'm impacting with my message, and I think there's something so powerful in, I love actually hearing what they are saying, like seeing how my message is impacting them personally.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't get that through COVID. I don't get that as much through Zooms. And it was such a fulfilling thing for me when people started to come up to me afterwards to tell me, I am so glad that you shared that. I can't even believe it.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. That's one of the best parts is after the talk, and then someone you're like, a lot of my talks were at conferences, and I would stay the entire time. I wouldn't just go for the one session that I was speaking at. And usually later on in the day or 2 days, later at the conference, someone will bump into you and say, "Hey, you gave that talk about X, Y, and Z." And like, the fact that they remembered it is, a big win. But then they tell me about how like, oh, when they get back to the office, they're going to do this and they're going to implement that. And that just makes me feel, so much better.
Well, and there's something about, I don't know about you, but I never feel like my story is special. I feel like I am just on this planet doing the thing, being a mom, being a chief people officer, and you don't really realize the impact that your story has until you share it with others, and it makes a difference.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And even if your story is not special, as you say, it's going to be, you have learned something and lived something and gone through something that someone else can benefit from. And I think that's the big value for it. So it is 2023, new year. A lot of people have already, ruined their resolutions, which is absolutely fine. But how can we maybe make this year a little bit better? What can we do, in being, put your executive coach hat on and help us figure out, us as leaders, how can we make 2023 better, not just for us, but for our team as well?
So I feel like 2023, people have been coming in hot with like screw resolutions. They're wasting time. Like I have seen a lot of that. And I'm the kind of person that I love a good resolution. Like I love the time to start over, a Monday, a birthday, a new month, all of that. Every single time I'm pumped for it, right? And so for me, I'm here for the resolution. But I think where people go wrong is they set themselves in this mindset of perfection. It's got to be all or nothing. And, like this weekend when I ate some of the candy that was in my Christmas stocking, well, my diet's ruined now for all of 2023. Got to start over in 2024. Like, let's not do that. Let's instead of focusing on this perfection and instead of focusing on a certain goal, right? Maybe your goal is to lose 50 pounds. Don't focus on the 50 pounds. Focus on the actions that you have to take to lose the 50 pounds, right? So focus on, I'm going to work out 3 days a week. I'm going to make sure that I eat this many leafy greens and that I have fruits and vegetables more than I do takeout. Focus on the things that are within your control. And then that number on the scale, that goal, that will come by doing the actions.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think it's a lot of people focus on the outcome and not the process. And I think going through the process is one of those really beneficial things. When I go back to, I think back 10 years ago when I ran my first marathon, and, if I just focused on 26.2 miles, I would probably never get there. But I focused on the fact that, okay, I can run a 5K, so let's add a mile to that, next week. Let's do 4 miles. Okay, I ran 4 miles. Now I can check that off. And it was really cool because I had this is back before you had the nice little apps and stuff to do things for you. I printed out a sheet of paper and I had on there like what my goal was each week. And I had each week labeled of, I'm going to do 3 runs and the long run is going to be this, this, this. And I would check the checkbox and being able to actually like check something off that was small, but it wasn't the final goal. It was just the process. And of course, like life would happen, every now and then your knee starts hurting or your ankle's hurting and you're going to skip a week or you're going to miss those long runs. You're not going to hit that goal, but how is it you can get yourself back on track? And if you have that long goal, but you have it broken down into steps along the way, you can get back on track.
Well, and that's why those outcomes don't work, right? Because so many resolutions are, I'm not going to have any sugar. Okay, well, so then you mess up and you have sugar, like, then what happens? But I love the marathon analogy. And one of my favorite things about the race analogy, you guys obviously know I'm a big fitness buff, is that for 99% of the time, you are having to do the work. Think about it. Like when you start a race, it is super exciting. You're pumped up. You've got adrenaline. You're ready to go. And maybe you run like 2 or 3 miles. And then you're really like, dang, I got a long way to go. And you're doing the work and you're doing the work and you're doing the work. And you don't get to celebrate until you see, that finish line, which is so far away, right? So that whole time that we spend in the middle, right, is when it's so easy to want to give up and so easy to say, I'm done. That's it. Why am I doing this? And so I encourage you to remember that that's where you have to do the work. And it's 99% of the time because those other 2 little endpoints, the start and the finish of that race, are so tiny compared to what you're doing in the middle.
So how do we make doing the work? And that seems to be that's where people fail, right? They just don't do the work. And how do we make the application of the goal or the thing that we want to do resonate? How do we make it happen? How do we stay committed to doing the work?
You have to really understand who you are and what your why is. And I know that that has been said 20 times over. Simon Sinek started with it, but if you're not doing it for the right reasons, like that it is a calling, that it is what fulfills you, you're not going to do the work.
Right.
And as someone that is a chief people officer by day, has my own business, by all other hours of the day, I feel that way a lot of the time. I feel like I am in the middle. I feel like I'm doing 10,000 things and nothing is moving this needle, whatever this needle is. I don't even know, but you're in there and you're doing the work. And I have to remember when I'm having those moments of frustration, right? Because I'm putting out social media posts, I'm doing blog posts, I'm doing podcasts, I'm writing a book, I'm doing all of these things. I have to remember that it's because I want to help people. And when I remember that sharing my message, what it does for some people, right? And I call back on the memories of when I'm doing keynote speeches and people come up to me afterwards and they're like, wow, that really impacted me. I go back to that and I stay focused. Now, it's not easy. I will tell you that. Like there are just all the time I have those moments, but you have to learn to go back to that why moment. And it can't be something like, I want to make a lot of money, because you can do that doing anything.
Right. The way I see it is making money is the result of something.
It's the byproduct. Exactly. It is the byproduct of doing something that lights you up, right? Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't light you up, you're not in the right spot. And that is a big thing for people to remember. Like you can be really good at something and it not be your life's passion or your life's work.
Mm-hmm. I think you're absolutely right. I think, when I look back at what my why, it varies, it changes. It's not like a constant, but I can always boil it down to a couple of things. It's always coming down to, I want to make complex problems seem simple. I want to, whether that's leadership for me, technology, when I was starting out as a first-time manager, managing tech people and being a tech person myself, it was very difficult. Communication was a challenge. Ego is a big problem in the tech world. We run into a lot of ego, and how do we get through that? And all these are different complex problems. And how can we make these problems simplified? And that's the whole purpose of this podcast, is to take a complex problem like technology leadership and let's make it simple and let's simplify it. So I think you're right, focusing in on that why. But what do you say to people that maybe they're not sure what their why is yet?
Yeah. And I mean, that can be a really big thing. I was lucky in that I figured mine out very early on, but I work with people all the time that have no idea what they want their career path to look like, or they're going through this crisis where they realize the career that they've been in for the last 20 years isn't what they want to be doing anymore. And I would say you have to start doing the work of writing down what you love, and then also write down all the things you absolutely never want to do again. Because it may not give you the answer, but it's going to tell you where you shouldn't be, which is just as powerful of a question as where you should be. And it may take a few tries. When I was trying to figure out what lane I needed to end up in after my fitness journey, I went out, I got my PMP, I was thinking project management. I had all these other things, which I'm looking back at now. My husband's a project manager, and I'm like, hell no would I do that. But you've got to try. Yeah.
Yeah, my wife's a project manager, so I get you. It's out of my wheelhouse for sure.
I tell people all the time, like, no, thank you. But no, forget.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things you talk about is sticky floors and glass ceilings. What is a sticky floor?
Glass ceilings and sticky floors. So I'll start with glass ceilings. Everybody knows the glass ceiling. It is that very real but existing ceiling at the top that is very challenging for women and other minorities to bust through. But the way I look at glass ceilings is that everybody has one, not just women and minority groups. Everybody has a glass ceiling that they are bumping their head against that they can't seem to break through for the life of them. And my theory is that it's not the glass ceiling that we're stuck in, but it's our own sticky floors. Okay. And those sticky floors can be limiting beliefs like imposter syndrome, perfectionism, which we already touched on a little bit today. Mm-hmm. The fear of failure, the fear of judgment, but it can also be toxic relationships. If you have a partner, a spouse, a friend, a colleague that's constantly bashing your efforts, but you're still staying there, coming back for more. It could be toxic behaviors that you're engaging in, gambling, addiction, alcohol, things that you're doing that are holding you back and keeping you stuck. And when it comes to certain things, like equal pay, for example, women are not going to see equal pay in our lifetime. It's going to take 132 years for us to reach equal pay. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing something internally to break through the glass ceiling. And that is addressing those sticky floors, working through them, and busting through your own glass ceiling.
So how do you identify what is that sticky floor that's kind of holding you back? What is that? I've heard someone talk about this before, and they use the term lids and labels. That you have
labels. Okay.
Yeah, that you've created a label for yourself. You say, I'm just not a people person, or I'm just not a public speaker, and you've given yourself a label that's basically your lid holding you down. And so how do you identify?
I've never heard lids and labels before, but I love it. And I believe that's very true. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you a story about myself that it was so interesting how it was just this light bulb moment that clicked for me. I do not consider myself a perfectionist at all. I have a messy house. I don't need to, organize everything in a certain way. Like, I'm just kind of this, like, whatever goes parent, very easygoing. But when it came to my workouts, if I did not get 30 minutes of cardio plus my weight training, it was a complete waste of my time. Like, don't even bother me. I'm not going to do it. I don't have the time. My husband would come up here to my home gym and he would do like a 15-minute workout. And he'd be like, it's all I got time for. I got to get it in. And I would, in my head, I'm going, that is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. You're not going to do anything in 15 minutes. But then he does that for 4 days in a row. He's got a whole hour of working out ahead of me, right? If I hand you a $20 bill and your goal was to save $100, are you going to take that $20 bill and throw it away? Absolutely not, right? But that's what I was doing with my perfectionism and my working out. I was 100% sabotaging my health and fitness relationship because it wasn't meeting my standards or my perceptions, okay? So the tricky piece of that is like, well, dang, Erica, how did you come to that real? Like, yes, that's easy now that you say it out loud, but I didn't realize that for a long time. And it took someone else in my realm saying that they did the same thing. And I was like, I do that too. And then I was like, oh my gosh. And I started to notice my pattern and my thinking pattern. And what I love to say is you can't unring the bell. Mm-hmm. So once I recognized that, now when I see it's an unconscious thought for me. And no matter what, if I don't do 30 minutes, that thought creeps in, but I have the tools now. And when I work with my clients, I have a 3-step framework that I use. It's name it, question it, and shift it. And the name it piece is actually being able to name it. The second piece is questioning it, saying, does this serve me? Is this true? Is this helpful? And then it's shifting it and actually taking that mindset and saying, okay, is it true that no minutes is better than 15 minutes? Absolutely not. And I start to have a different dialogue in my head. And that was one of the cases. And once you start to see this pattern, you start to recognize where it shows up for you in your life in different spaces.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And your story, it actually resonates with me quite a bit because I had the exact opposite thing where I would go work out for like 10 minutes because Peloton has these like 10-minute classes. And I would go, just register for a 10-minute class and I would do it. My wife's like, why are you doing that? 10 minutes isn't enough to do anything. And I kept doing it. And then she started noticing like, I'm getting a little bit fitter. I'm getting a little bit better in shape. And because she would wait and do like a 30-minute workout, once a week or something. Yeah, I was doing these 10-minute ones 5 days a week. It was just like, it was funny that she shifted and, we started doing those 10-minute things together, and it's a whole lot easier now because now we have time for 10 minutes. We don't have time for
everybody's got 10 minutes. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's this whole concept. And what I have learned about myself is that very rigid challenges, this all or nothing mentality, like the 75 hard, that's been very popular in the past. That does not work for me because if I do not hit one of those targets, like then it's done. It's over for me, and that's not helpful.
Yep, I'm the same way because someone challenged me. It's like, well, why don't you do 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats every day? Like, okay. And then I do it and I miss like the 5th day. I'm like, okay, well, I'm done.
Yep, it's over. and that's not beneficial, right? But now that I have this awareness, I can recognize that like, okay, if I do miss one day, I'm just going to pick it up again. Maybe my challenge will be 31 days instead of 30 days. So I have learned with myself, my sticky floor perfectionism and how it shows up and what I need to do to shift that.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's really important because a lot of times we get caught up on these streaks or these things. And once we break them, we are done, right? And we need to realize that we have to give ourselves a little bit of grace, a little bit of forgiveness, a little bit of a chance to realize that life happens. Because I know I was doing this thing on my Apple Watch, and I was trying to hit all 3 rings closed out every single day for a year. And I got 190 some odd days in, and then I got the flu. I got sick,
See, this just gives me anxiety right now. Just this story alone.
And I missed it. And after that, I was like, it was probably like 2 weeks before I worked out again. Well, no, I felt fine. I was like, well, what's the point now? Yeah.
And I have put measures into place to encourage challenging my perfectionist belief, right? So I too have the Apple Watch. Now I take it off at the end of every single day, which means I usually do not meet any of my circle goals. And I used to be that circle goal queen, So I take my Apple Watch off during all of this. I used to set it for every single dog walk for an outdoor walk. And sometimes those walks would be like 2 minutes. That doesn't matter, And I'm working on the retraining of the brain. But, everybody has a sticky floor of some kind, whatever that is. You just have to recognize it, see how it shows up, and then choose to shift your mindset. And then if you want to take it that step further, doing some of the things like I'm doing, actively making myself uncomfortable every day by removing the Apple Watch or telling myself that it's okay if I mess up on a streak, enforcing that. Just last night, I was laying in bed and I'm trying, one of my New Year's things, trying to meditate every day. And my kids woke me up in the morning, so I couldn't meditate in the morning. I was like, I'm going to meditate at night. And I have this little device that I meditate with. And it was, of course, dead as a doornail, not charged. And I was like, well, I've got 2 options. Pretty freaking tired, so I could just go to sleep, which would be the same thing. Or I can get up, walk all the way to the kitchen where the charger is, let it charge for 10 minutes, and then come back and meditate for more, you know? And the perfectionist would have made me do that to not lose my streak. But I was like, Erica, this is a prime example of you trying to be a perfectionist, so you need to let it go. And I rolled over and went to sleep. And guess what? Nobody died.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's important to bring up that we all have to make those choices and realize that I like what you said about getting used to being uncomfortable. And, one of the things I tell my kids is that you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Because my daughter will always tell me, she's 12, and, she's in that awkward stage sometimes in life. And she'll tell me, well, that feels uncomfortable. I said, you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. She plays softball, and she's a pitcher. And she made a new team, and they didn't start her at pitcher. They put her at shortstop for some reason. And she's playing, and I'm like, what did you tell the coach she pitched? She's like, well, kinda. I'm like, kinda? I mean, go tell your coach that you want to pitch. And she's like, mm-mm. And then like 3 practices go by. She hasn't told the coach. She hasn't said a word about it. And then they have their first game and they lose. Their pitcher's terrible. It just doesn't go very well. I'm like, tell the coach you want to pitch, and she's like, well, I don't want to. I don't want to seem like I'm, a brat or something. It's like, just go tell her that you pitched your last 2 seasons and you want to pitch. And she did it and then became a pitcher. It was that simple of the ability to, you got to be uncomfortable and learning that sometimes it's important to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
We have all heard about the growth and the magic happening outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important that you're teaching your kids this at a young age, because confidence comes from repetition. Confidence comes from doing that hard thing over and over and over, right? None of us used to be able to walk. We were all little babies and we could never walk before, right? But we kept trying and we gained our now there's no question of whether or not I can get up and walk out this room. But it's because we get up, we fall, we get up again, we fall. We do the uncomfortable thing on repeat. And when you can do the uncomfortable thing on repeat, it doesn't become so uncomfortable. And that includes just doing uncomfortable things, because you start to see that you have this track record of surviving the uncomfortable thing. Hopefully, you've got some great outcomes. I'm sure you've gotten a whole lot of yeses, maybe some no's in there. But hopefully, you're starting to learn that you can survive those and sometimes even thrive, like your daughter becoming a pitcher, So it's very important to push yourself outside of those boundaries and to do the hard thing.
Yeah, there was a book that I read about 100 Days of Rejection, where a guy tried to get rejected 100 days by asking, absolutely ridiculous request, where he would go to, he went to Krispy Kreme donuts and asked them to make donuts in the shape of the Olympic rings, and they actually did it. And he said he realized that sometimes, making uncomfortable requests that you think you're going to get rejected upon, you'll find out that you will actually get a yes. And you need to get comfortable asking for things and being, going through this process. And I told my daughter about it, and she's, just rolls her eyes like, no. I said, we'll try it. Why don't you try it? Because she was telling me about something in her school where she got a bad grade. And I said, well, ask your teacher if there's some extra credit or something. She's like, no, the teacher told us there's no extra credit. I was like, did you ask? Well, no. Well, why don't you go ask? And, after pushing her a little bit, she finally went and talked to her teacher, and her teacher just gave her extra points. Just gave it to her. She didn't have to do anything. Just ask. And it's one of those things where sometimes every now and then, and even as a teacher, I teach part-time at Winthrop University. You just want a student to come and talk to you and show that they're trying and show that they're committed to their success in one way or another. And sometimes that's enough. And I think that, her getting that uncomfortable question of asking her teacher for help, or asking her teacher for, some way that she can improve her grade, helped her in the long run of getting comfortable, of doing something that's uncomfortable.
It's so interesting. I was reading a book recently, and it was talking about women in negotiation was the whole concept behind the book. But it takes us back to our childhood, because you say it's your daughter, I bring this up, where girls, from a cultural standpoint, we're typically taught collaborative things and collaborative sports, where boys are taught to be rough and tumble, get up, you lose, you do it again, whatever, we're best friends, let's go. And it's such a different mentality between boys and girls and men and women when it comes to asking for things. There's been a lot of research that shows that a lot of men are very comfortable asking, whereas women they don't want to, like your daughter, even pose the idea because it might put somebody out. But I'm challenged. I'm not saying it's not just all women. Like, this does happen to men as well. But don't be afraid of putting somebody out. A lot of the times it's just an ask.
No, I think you're right. Because sometimes I know, like, when I just look at, I have 3 kids. So I have 2 boys and 1 girl. And when I look at sports, soccer, let's take soccer, for example, when they're younger and they're playing soccer. My sons are super aggressive. They would go and take the ball from people on their own team if they had to, in order to score. And they would yell at their team if their team made a mistake. They were very aggressive. Whereas my daughter's like, I'll just wait for them to pass it to me. I don't want to steal the ball from them.
100%. 100%. And I mean, we all have to do better, right? We all have to do better. But it was interesting to me because as a female, I can totally relate, right? Whereas like guys have this mentality, we're like, yeah, I'm just gonna ask for 10,000 more. What's the big deal? They tell me no. They tell me no. Whereas women are like, I don't want to upset anybody. I don't want to make it. Be uncomfortable. It really is okay.
Yeah, that reminds me of another thing me and my wife talk about is the fact that if I see a job description, if I qualify for like 80% of the things that are on there, I'm like, all right, I'll apply. I can learn the next 20%, along the way. I'll be able to like figure it out. It's not a big deal. Whereas she's like, if I don't hit 100% of those qualifications, I'm not qualified. I'm like, well, I said, I don't know why that's different.
I'll tell you, as a chief people officer who reviews job descriptions, sometimes I look at these job descriptions that these managers put out to me and I'm like, who do you think this unicorn is? Like, what? And I look at this job description and I'll send it back because I know that they're not going to invite everyone to apply to do the job that they're asking for. My dream candidate, not going to happen.
I'll never forget when I first became a manager of web and mobile development. This is many years ago. The iPhone had been out for maybe 2 years. So very few mobile developers out there, right? And so I asked for our HR recruiter to create a job description for me. So they wrote the job descriptions for us at that company. And the job description that they wrote said 5 to 10 years of mobile development experience. And I just said, that's impossible. She's like, well, for this level position, we need 5 to 10 years of experience. I said, well, that doesn't exist. There hasn't been mobile development for 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I work in IT as well. And sometimes I see these job descriptions that come out and I'm like, how am I going to find this?
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, okay, I got it. But, from a leadership standpoint, if you are in management, it is important to recognize those factors that women may not apply, right? Or they may not ask for the raise, or they may not ask for the promotion. And if you are in leadership, be the advocate for them. I was very fortunate that when I was climbing up the HR ranks, I had an advocate, and I call him an advocate, not a mentor, but an advocate, because he put me in the room that I needed to be in. He challenged me to do things outside of my comfort zone that I would not have done. And I don't want to say because I'm a woman, but it is kind of because I'm a woman.
Yeah, I think for me, it's been helpful to have my wife, who also is in tech project manager, to talk about things from her perspective that I would have never thought about, such as the whole applying for jobs and things like that. So I think it's been really helpful for me to go through that and have someone, like you talked about, an advocate that can help you and tell you, like, you need to make sure that when she's taught me about that when I interview people. I told her I would look at resumes and just exclude them from this. She's like, well, why would you do that? And then she explains to me like where someone's coming from. I was like, oh, I never would have thought about that. So just having those conversations were really helpful.
Absolutely. Have the conversation. Have the uncomfortable conversations.
Yes.
Ask people about those things, because not everybody, and when I say ask people about those things, I mean ask people in your network how they would view something, because you could ask another female, if you're a male, how does this resonate, or a person of color, or someone in the LGBTQ plus community. That way you are ensuring you're creating this inclusive environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that we kind of hinted at the beginning of the conversation that I don't think we've gotten into yet is, what should we be doing if we want to have this best year ever and have this maybe get promoted or develop a stronger culture for our team and things like that? What do we need to do to push ourselves a little bit further?
Read. It is a super simple answer, but I believe it's so much in reading good leadership books. Bring in different perspectives, right? So that you can practice how you want to show up in 2023. Okay. If you are a leader and you want to be a better leader to your team, ask for direct feedback. Okay. How can I serve you better this year? Okay. What do you want me to continue to do? What do you want? Is there anything you want me to stop doing? Now, if you have a team that is not super open and transparent, this may take some digging, but asking is the first step because every single person on your team is different. You cannot show up as the same person for everyone on your team. You, as the leader, are responsible for meeting them where they're at. So embrace that team mentality, be a better leader, ask them for your direct feedback. How can you better serve them? Now, if you want to get promoted, my biggest thing here is ask your freaking boss. What do I need to do to get to the next level here? Because every company is different. First of all, if you don't ask, they may not know you want a promotion.
Yep.
They may not know that you are looking to challenge yourself. When you ask, tell your leader, give me stretch assignments. Give me things outside of my comfort zone. Can I go talk to this person in that department so that you are learning more and adding more things to your toolkit? So the more you learn, the better leader you'll be. And
I think that's really, I was going to say, I think it's really good. And I got a little short story. So I mentioned that I taught part-time at Winthrop University, and I had a position open up at the company that I used to work for a web developer. And one of my students came up to me and said, how can I, get a job with your company doing that? And I kind of, shrugged him off because I knew he was still in school, still needed a lot of work. I said, well, these are the skills that I'm actually looking for. And I gave him a list of like languages that I wanted to see. And I said, if anybody applied, they would need to have a good web portfolio of things that they've done and show me, some initiative and effort. And about 6 months went by and that position closed. And then I had another position open up, and he showed up at my office at the university during my office hours. And he came in with a bunch of certificates that he printed off from this is back when lynda.com was there. And he's like, here, I took this development course. I took this development course. Here's a link to my portfolio where I built these sites and show you the skill set. And I was like, all right, ended up hiring him. He was one of the best hires that I had.
I was going to say, you can't not give him a job.
Exactly. And it's like, he asked the question, I gave him answers, and then he went and did it. I think it goes back to what you said at the beginning. You have to do the work, right? That's when you're doing it. And he went and did the work during that period of time where I didn't hear from him. He was actually doing the work and came back, and sure enough.
And if you don't have a John that's like, here's your list of stuff, my biggest recommendation for people who are looking to go to the next level in their career is to get on LinkedIn and find people in the role that you want. Look at what they have listed out there and identify your gaps. What are you missing? Okay. That also with open positions that are posted. If you want to be a director of whatever, start looking for that open role position. I'm not saying go apply. I'm saying look at that, pull in where your gaps are, do the work like your student did, and then come ready to apply, ready to rock and roll.
Yep, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's really good feedback. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. I think we've answered a lot of questions and connected on a lot of stuff to help people have a great 2023. So, Erica, how can people connect with you online and learn more about what you're doing?
Absolutely. If you enjoyed my pearls of wisdom, I suppose, here, you can pop over to my podcast, From Now to Next. It's wherever you get your podcast. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am a huge person on messaging on LinkedIn. So if you hear me here, let me know in a message. I'll respond. We can chat. Happy to help in any way I can. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, all the lights. But LinkedIn and my podcast are the top places to find me.
Awesome. And I'll link that up in the show notes too at geekleader.com. Erica, thanks so much for coming on the show. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, don't forget to check out merch. We have some t-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also, don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.